This is the DRS train.
You know, I've never actually played the bassoon before. That was just the spirit of America flowing through my fingers. I'm Peter Brook. I'm joined by Ciaron Smith and Nedzo's F1 Gridbox, and you're listening to the DRS Train podcast. So, perhaps mercifully, Miami has come and gone. Relatively interesting weekend by their standards, but I suppose one thing I want to bring up first is that before the race had even started, we got the announcement that Miami is going to be on the grid until 2041, which is quite a significant contract extension for, well, any race, especially a non-Middle Eastern one. I suppose I want to flex a bit as well, because this gave me an opportunity that... Nice. This gave me an opportunity that within 3 days, I managed to ratio both Autosport and Formula One itself. Because this announcement came, they got about 30,000 likes on the tweet saying, oh, we're racing here till 2041. So I put out a tweet saying, oh, we can do this, but we can't race in, Zandvoort or Hockenheim or France or whatever. And it got 42,000 likes. So I think I've tapped into what a lot of people are thinking. But even though this race by Miami standards was reasonably good, I don't think we need another 16 of these in the future.
I think that, first of all, good to be with you both. I think that Formula One has gone in a different direction with Liberty Media, and that's one of commercialization, maximizing profits, and growing the U.S. market fan base. And I think that's the Miami race, even though I think the track is technically lacking and not an interesting race circuit. I think that it is in a major market and has generated a lot of interest. So from a commercial standpoint, it was clear they were going to extend it. And not just that, it looks like some of those classic tracks that are in the more traditional European markets may even become rotational. So I guess we have to get used to this.
This is the problem we have with modern Formula One calendars. There's a lot of people wanting a lot of tracks in a lot of different places, and you only have, I wanted to say we only have 20 spots, but it's now 24, 25. Like, there's a good chance we could see the calendar expand to beyond 25 races, and even then we're still struggling to fit in both races that will provide entertainment and races that will provide money. So, yeah, but I think there is a place for races that we've said which are there to expand markets, but they have to be in good venues. And I think this race in Miami was a step in the right direction, but will it maintain this over until 2041? I doubt it. It would need some major modifications or some other factors to come into play for that to be the case. But if we can continue to produce interesting encounters like this, then I think we can look forward to maybe some future into Miami. But if not, then we'll just have to complain for the next however many years, 16, 17 years.
Because on my tweet, there were Americans trying to defend this extension. They're like, oh, I go and I think it's great. And it's like, I have no doubt that it's a great location, although it is actually quite far outside the center of Miami. And the atmosphere in that is good. But like in terms of circuits, the American could do so much better than Miami. Let's be honest, because we could go back to Watkins Glen after 45 years. Road America's there. One of the variations at Daytona. Hell, let's even give the suspension a good workout and try Laguna Seca, or dare I say, go back to Indianapolis. Like there are a lot of options, just not bloody Miami.
Well, this is a dilemma when it comes to American circuits. Obviously, I've got quite a surprising knowledge of America due to my NASCAR and IndyCar fanage. you could argue. And well, if I was to pick out 3 circuits that were, if we were to keep the free race model, I'd go for. I think that the Las Vegas Grand Prix can stay because it provides an entertaining. It's both entertainment, but it's also providing a unique perspective on racing in very cold conditions. And the 2 races it's produced have been pretty decent. As the Miami has been hit or miss. Obviously, 2022, I don't remember anything happening. 2023, I don't remember anything happening. Last year provided Lando's win, but otherwise wouldn't have been a good race without a safety car. And 2025, this year has produced a decent enough race. And Texas has been good. I'd keep Vegas. I'd go to Road America because Road America is, I wouldn't call it the spa of America, but it's definitely in terms of rate, in terms of circuit length, and in terms of, it would be the perfect circuit for Formula One because it has lots of massive straights, lots of heavy braking zones, and enough in the middle to make it interesting. It doesn't have much elevation. It does have an elevation change, but it's not like up and down like something like the Portimao circuit. But you don't need elevation to really make a good F1 circuit. And I mean, we talked about Watkins Glen. No, Watkins Glen is too small for modern Formula One cars. Especially with, like, the boot section would produce nothing of note, nothing special. You can hardly overtake there in general. In like IndyCar haven't gone there for the last couple of years, which I'm surprised at. But yeah, I'd go Road America. I'd go Vegas, and if I had to add another one, I'd go for Indianapolis. But that's just because it was. I'd actually argue that a 2-race model with Road America and Vegas would just be better overall, and you could open up a space for another race potentially in the American continent, potentially like Argentina or somewhere like that.
The problem here is that overtaking is just one part of a good circuit. It doesn't always have to be that. I think some of these tracks are just beautiful to see cars race on, and I think Sonoma is another one that's great. And ultimately, Miami track, it's not that it's not up to our standards. It has so many problems, in my opinion. And, that starts with, one, the lack of flow. Okay, so I think most people watching this race circuit say that it looks artificial, it's disjointed, it's got all these awkward low-speed sections that completely disrupt the racing rhythm. It's got way too many tight corners. So let's think about turns 14 and 16, right? That chicane. What's the point of that? Why is that chicane even there? You can't even pass there. It just slows down the action. It doesn't add any excitement. Then the overtaking at Miami, honestly, if it wasn't for a VSC today, or in the race, I don't think there were that many overtakes. And I don't think runoff areas are great, so it's not even that safe of a circuit. And it just feels like commercialization over sport. Prioritizes all these celebrities and everything rather than just focusing on the racing, which is ultimately what the traditional fans and the real racing fans want. So it's not just that we're complaining for the sake of complaining. There are many issues with this circuit, but the race actually was half decent, and there's a lot to talk about there. So maybe we should go to that next.
Quickly, before we do move on to that, I'll quickly explain. That chicane you were talking about. When they first brought it in 20, obviously for the first race in 22, they said that it was supposed to create mistakes. It was supposed to be a mistake generator with obviously it's got massive curbs and it's meant to put the drivers off. And on the exit, you can clip the wall and stuff. It was basically meant to provide mistakes, meant to provide entertainment. But it eventually just hasn't ended up doing that because it's not really how modern F1 cars work. Like, if you were in like 2005 cars, maybe with the quick direction change, you'd see someone like lose the back end and have a lazy spin into a barrier. But nowadays, with the cars so on rails, if you're going to make drivers make a mistake, you need to be on it like what Jeddah has, which is thousands of S sections, where you have to quickly change direction and it's all the cars right on the ragged edge of grip. But at Miami, that's much less likely to happen in that chicane.
The only mistake was including that chicane.
Okay. It just technically that chicane, it did set the tone for the rest of Max's season last year. After he hit that bollard, that seemed to mess everything up. But my thing with Miami is the whole vibe across the weekend, because they, like, yesterday the parade lap, they were driving those like Lego cars, and then they did the driver interviews were done on the back of a truck, and then 2 years ago they had them ride on the like police quad bikes or something. And it's like, can this race ever just be normal? And I feel like they could justify that kind of just cringe if the races were good. But they hype it up and the races suck. And it's like, I guess, if you're there for the atmosphere is cool because it's all fun and stupid. But the races are just so bloody boring because the circuit doesn't work. And I've said this time and time again, that circuit in the 1980s would have absolutely slapped. And it would have been like, okay, we've tried Detroit and Dallas and Caesar's Palace. And I think we finally hit something with Miami. Get like that, I think would have worked with the turbo cars, and it would have been Miami Vice, and the drivers would have been all over it. And yeah, but now it just doesn't land because it's just Martin Brundle chatting to random NFL players and boxers and influencers, and I'm just like, has anyone over the age of 16 heard of these people and whatnot? And it's not good.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. It's just like culture in general has been geared towards younger people more and more. You even in the past you'd see a broader age range participation in popular culture. I feel like it's very much skewed towards the younger generation, but I agree with all the points made by both of you. So those are things to think about, I think, going forwards for F1.
So let's talk about the race itself, and I guess we'll get started with McLaren. They got themselves another 1-2. I think Crofty was saying something like, in terms of the margin to third, it was the biggest 1-2 probably since like 2007 or something of that nature.
2007 Monaco Grand Prix, he said.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because they were 30 seconds ahead of George.
So and the only reason that it was that big is because the main man made a mistake in qualifying and was down the order. So there was only one Ferrari driver who could challenge McLaren that weekend, and he is incompetent around Monaco. So yeah, I think that was a bit skewed. Honestly, I mean that was a bit of a skewed result because Kimi Räikkönen would have definitely been closer than Felipe Massa was to those McLarens. Like,
yeah, the one who thinks he can win championships in the courtroom instead of on track. So, yeah, but they had. So they had, so sprint race, it was a 1-2. Again, Lando, safety car privilege, gets the win off of that one in the sprint.
Yeah.
Because, well, this is the thing, they didn't get pole in either race because it was Antonelli somehow pulls a pole out of his arse in the sprint race. And then it's Max, again, just clinches it from both of them in the main race. But yeah, we saw from them the first 20 laps, both of them had to try and wiggle their way past Max. Piastri he got it done much faster and easier than Lando seemed to take several attempts because it seems like even though he's raced him more than anyone else except Lewis at this point, he still doesn't really understand how to race against Max. But once they got ahead, once Piastri got ahead, there was that 8-second advantage in like 3 or 4 laps. They just absolutely, just stormed ahead. Yeah. Lando was closing in towards the end, but it wasn't enough, and it means that Piastri has got his 3rd consecutive win. So he's really starting to run away with this at the moment.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that, in that McLaren, first of all, Pirelli, again, brought tires that just seemingly there's no difference between them. It was another one-stop race. It didn't matter if you started on the hard or the mediums. It looked like the outcome was the same. So not sure what on earth is going on there. It's like Pirelli have just decided to make a tire that's like one shoe fits all sizes, and they don't have any strategic variation. Because without this VSC, I think this would have been even more of a dominant win for McLaren. It was just total domination. They underperformed in qualifying. A McLaren driver should have been on pole. And in the main race, Lando made his life much more difficult than it should have been by going off in the first corner. And I think, yes, Max perhaps was a little over-aggressive. But again, not every driver would have put themselves in that position. Lando has to be a bit smarter about how he's racing certain drivers. So Oscar really had an easy win because once he passed Max, he had this buffer which he used to basically pull ahead of Lando, who took forever to clear the other cars and was like, as Nedzo pointed out, or somebody pointed out earlier, Piastri was like 9 seconds ahead of Norris by the time Norris had cleared all the other cars to get into second place. So, job done. And, Piastri extends his championship lead.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Lando. It seems to be that when Lando races against Max, his brain just resets. Like, he tries to race Max like he does any other driver. But what he doesn't realise is Max games the system. If the system says, "Oh, you can force people off the track," he forces people off the track. If the system says, "Oh, you have to be at a certain point in the corner, and then you can force people off the track," he does exactly what the rules say. And Lando doesn't seem to get that. He seems to think that he will be given room when he's alongside, or when if there's not a wall there, Max will just force you off a circuit because he knows that he will get away with it because that's what the rules say and that's how modern Formula One is. I mean, I mentioned this on Twitter because this was after the sprint when we talked about Alonso and Lawson's incidents, which we'll get to, and Alonso and Lawson, and there was another one with Piastri and Antonelli at the start. What happened to having to leave a car's width to another driver on the exit of a corner? What happened to? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. As I said, I don't hate Verstappen. I don't hate Antonelli, Piastri, any of these guys who've been involved in these incidents because they're just playing what the system tells them to play. It's stupid. But going back to Norris, he just needs to actually look at what's going on around him. He's going up against Max Verstappen. He's not going to be able to just overtake him around the outside. If you let Verstappen take the inside, he's always going to come out in front unless there's a massive DRS advantage like he eventually did and then got by. It's just ridiculous, and that cost Lando a win today. And now Oscar has become. We were talking about statistics earlier. Oscar's become the McLaren driver to get 3 consecutive wins. The first McLaren driver to get 3 consecutive wins since Mika Hakkinen at the back end of '97 and at the start of '98. That was when he won 97 at Jerez de la Frontera, Australia, and I'm assuming the race after that was Brazil back in '98.
Or Brazil or Argentina, one of the. Oh no,
Yeah.
Michael won Argentina, I think. But yeah, that was across 2 seasons as well. That wasn't even in one season because like Nico Rosberg, until they crashed at Barcelona, he was going to get a new record for consecutive wins across 2015, 2016. But because it was across 2 seasons, it doesn't count. In the same way that Antonelli is not the youngest pole sitter because sprint races don't count. It's still Vettel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I think I want to just touch on Lando afterwards because his whole demeanor is just very unprofessional to me. Before we get there, about Mika's 3 wins. Yes, as you said, Peter, across 2 seasons, Mika also had some significant help. Team orders in Jerez and team orders in Australia. Ron getting on the radio and telling Coulthard to move out of the way in Jerez, and then again in Australia. So, in a way, even that wasn't really 3 true consecutive wins because Mika would not have won Jerez or Australia without DC moving out of the way. This has really been the first time since even before that a McLaren driver has won 3 in a row on pure merit, which tells you something.
It would have been, wouldn't it?
Senna,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
It would have been someone like Senna. That to me is. I'm a huge Mika Hakkinen fan. I always was a Mika Hakkinen fan, but he didn't exactly win Jerez and Melbourne on merit. Let's be honest. And I say that as a mega Mika Hakkinen fan. He was an amazing driver.
I mean, with Melbourne, this idea, whoever's leading at turn 1 gets to win the race. That's bollocks in my eyes. No, you have to earn it. You don't. Yeah, the race is not won at turn 1. Like that's ridiculous.
And that's because Ron. Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, team orders in general, especially team orders when it's going for the win, it's like, no, let's not do that. Like if you're in 10th or doing what Ferrari were doing in 7th or 8th, we'll get to them later. Like fair enough, but when you're fighting for the win, no, let them go for it. Don't just hand a win to them on a plate. You need to earn it. That's the thing.
Yeah, and it's because Ron had a father-son relationship with Mika after Adelaide '95. So people talk about Michael having full control at Ferrari. I think Mika had a similar thing at McLaren, honestly, which is very seldom talked about because it's trendy and fashionable to say that Michael was this domineering team driver who didn't let his teammates have a say. Neither did Ron with Mika and DC. Ron was always hyper focused on Mika, but that's neither here or there. I just wanted to say that Lando's post-race interview sums up how immature he is. I mean, I don't know if anybody saw that on Sky F1, but he was saying the most bizarre things. I mean, the reporter was asking him, why the first corner incident happened, and Lando was saying things like, it depends how much Max wants to fight. He's doing a good job. He can do whatever he wants. I just have to focus on myself. And then the reporter asked him, do you really feel that? And then he said, no, I'm just saying it for the interview. It was this bizarre, sarcastic, and flippant response. And
well, wasn't he saying he's like, well, if I go for it, they complain. If I don't go for it, they still complain or whatever.
Yeah, but he doesn't, just his whole demeanor goes back to what you're both saying. Like on the track, he doesn't make the right decisions, and he just doesn't look very focused off the track. I mean, you'd expect a more professional way of doing things at this point in his career. So he still has that kiddie vibe. He has it almost feels like Oscar is the more mature driver, doesn't it? That's shouldn't be the case.
Well, Lando, with his background, is very coddled and protected and all of that. And
Maybe.
yeah, I think it reflects in that.
Yeah. What I was going to say is, if he's going to say, "Oh, if I go for it, they complain. If I don't go for it, they still complain," is why don't you go for it and get the job done? It's like.
Yeah.
Very rarely do people. Obviously, that we talk about Formula One fans here, and that maybe this standard is a bit different. But usually, people only complain if there's something to complain about. If there's nothing to complain about, they don't complain. So maybe get your job done and actually do what you're supposed to do in the fastest car when you're a young driver who's supposed to be. We've seen how Lando in the midfield had produced some very good drivers before 2024, but then as soon as he's in a championship-winning car, all of a sudden he needs the entire team around him to give this underdog feel, and still he bottles when he's supposedly they're trying to claim he's an underdog when he's not.
He's always complaining about what people say about him in the media and on social media and everything, and it seems like he's basically unable to hold a relationship because of what they say about his girlfriends and everything else. And it's like, maybe just ignore your like army of neurotic teenage girls that follow you everywhere and have their own grandstand at Silverstone this year as well. Like, just don't have someone else control your social media and just ignore all of that completely and pretend it doesn't happen. And it won't get so in your head about what the media's like talking about with you or whatever, because he's the only driver that seems to have this, that whatever he says, they misinterpret it or they do something with it, but then he gives them room to twist it with a lot of what he says. And the other drivers don't seem to have that problem nearly as much. I mean, Lewis every once in a while, but not very often. But Lando, it's like after every race, he says something stupid and then it gets twisted by the media.
Mind management. I think that's what Jackie Stewart called it, didn't he? Lando needs to work on his mind management, just in the car, out of the car. He just isn't the full professional package.
Yeah, no other like title contender has ever been so self-deprecating. They're like, oh, I'm just not good enough, and I'm making so many mistakes, and blah blah blah. I suppose because he doesn't live in an era where you can use reliability as an excuse. That doesn't exist anymore. But people praise him because he's open about mental health in that sense. Because yeah, it is tough, but it's like maybe don't dwell on it so much. And this is people like Alan Jones and drivers have said, just don't. If you fixate on your weaknesses and your errors, it just makes them stronger. But like he had, because he gave Max the middle finger trying to pass him at one point. And then he himself, because he passed him, but then he'd made both of them go off track, so then he had to give the position back, and then it did eventually pass him, but it took him a good few attempts. Because he got pushed off at the start, but then not really pushed off in the figures of that opening sector. There's only really one line you can take through it because it's another one of these bloody twisty things full of runoff. And again, it's like maybe if we had less runoff, it wouldn't be so easy to push people off because otherwise they end up in the wall, and you probably do as well. And then it took, but then I think he tried again. It was when he gave the middle finger. He was pushed off, but not fully off because not all four wheels went off at turn one. But it's still, it took him much longer than it took Piastri to get by.
I think Lando is just, what I've seen is when it comes to actual driving, he's very emotive and he will, I think, react far too much on his instincts. Like with when we saw Oscar and Max going into turn one with Max on the inside, and you could see what was going to happen. Oscar saw Max was going to go deep, try and push him wide, so he decided to under and over him. Whereas Lando doesn't see that. He just sees, oh my god, I can go around the outside of him, not realizing it's Max Verstappen, and you're going to get pushed off a circuit. He's very emotive. He goes for the moves that are on without realizing what's going to happen later on in the day, like we saw in Saudi Arabia when Lewis DRS chickened him a couple of times. He's too emotive, and he allows his emotions to carry him too far. And then we see it in the post-race interviews and stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, the media sometimes can be absolute pricks, but for the most part, the media will only misconstrue what you say if you not just if you give them the room to, but if you act in the demeanor that Lando does. Because if you say something that could be misconstrued, but you do it in a way that's genuine, in the way that where they can see you're struggling or something like that, some way where you're being genuinely a nice person, they won't be too bad about it. But Lando's the type of person where he just doesn't see that, and he just wants everything to be over with. And when he's in a strop or when he's in a bad mood, he just wants everyone else to validate him, and that's not going to happen when you're up against like journalists who have been in the sport for 10, 20 years. I'm not sure who the journalist was that he was going up against, but I'm guessing it was one of the Sky Sportsmen, someone like a Rachel Brooks or someone like that. Someone who knows what they're talking about. So they're not going to just let you go, oh, how do you feel after that, and how bad is it, or how good is it? And it's like, no, they're not going to do that. They're going to ask you the hard-hitting questions.
Yeah, and that's a sign of immaturity. McLaren are very lucky that there are no other teams capable of challenging them so far this year because even though Oscar has been much more consistent recently than Lando, they're both underperforming in different ways. Sometimes in qualifying, sometimes in the race. So I don't think McLaren are really being tested. They have such a quick car, as we saw, not just in terms of raw speed, but tire management characteristics. The team has got an amazing package. But I'm about to drop a truth bomb
Hmm.
on the fans here because I actually was thinking about this. I saw a comment earlier saying that Lando Norris is way better than some other champions we've seen if he becomes champion. And I'm just going to go ahead and say this: Jacques Villeneuve in 1997 was a better driver than this version of Lando Norris.
I've got to
Let's
say,
let's just
you
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Nedzo. No, I'm done. I said my piece.
Okay. So that's your truth bomb. People have been talking about this. They've said, would Lando be the worst champion? Would Oscar be the worst champion? First, I'm going to make a point that I was originally going to make, and then I'm going to get onto yours. I will say that they have not really got anyone to challenge them. This reminds me, actually, I was going to say this reminds me of the 1996-97 Williams. I've always thought that the 1996 and 97 Williams were just as dominant as the 1992 and 93 Williams. It's just they had worse drivers in them. And
Yeah.
well, I think it's definitely the thing is with Villeneuve was he had like on his day he was like the fastest driver on the grid, like Australia 1.7 seconds out qualifying Frentzen and the guys behind. Yes, Schumacher was driving a red wheelie bin, but you get what I mean. He could prove himself on his day to be on the level of Schumacher, if not slightly faster. If not, obviously Schumacher as a all-rounder driver was far better. But Villeneuve on his day did prove himself, and he didn't the thing with Villeneuve was he didn't let his mentality fade. He might not have believed he was the best, but he always found if he couldn't get a one up on Schumacher on the track, I think Ciaron has said this before. If he couldn't get one up on Schumacher on the track, he tried to get one up on him in the mental side.
Yep.
And that's the thing with Villeneuve. With Norris, it's just he has quite a bit of pace. And that's it. There's nothing on the mental side. There's nothing on the physical side. There's nothing on the emotional side. There's nothing. The only champion I think that Lando or Oscar can make a credible case of being, that's Oscar as well, being a credible case of being better than is Phil Hill. And that's because Phil Hill, in his 3 years before, as a full-time Ferrari driver before making his championship run in 61, did nothing of note apart from winning one race in 1960 where all the other British teams boycotted due to dangerousness. And then he wins a title battle against Wolfgang von Trips, who, in my opinion, those two are the worst two drivers to go for a title battle, apart from maybe what Lando and Piastri are this year. But Phil Hill and Wolfgang von Trips, like, come on, like I think he won Sebring a couple of times in his endurance racing career, is quite storied. But after 1961, what did he do? Fuck all. I know he joined the Ferrari Rebel attempt in 1962, the ATS, but still, like there was nothing. And on the two in 61, on the two circuits that are actually driver oriented, Monaco and the Nürburgring, who won? Sterling Moss, driving a Lotus, which I think had about 150 less horsepower. And admittedly, Monaco's not a power track, but to lose around a conventional circuit like Monaco to a car like that is astonishing. But yeah, that's the only champion that Lando can have a credible case of being better than, because he also has, because if we take away before 2024, in midfield cars from 2019 to 2023, he was a decent enough driver and arguably top 5 on the grid. It's only now he's actually had pressure on him that he's started to plummet down the order.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
neither of them would be the worst champions, certainly, because like you said, it is Phil Hill. But then Phil Hill is a driver I am quite fond of. Because, yeah, I think with him as well is that once he got his first title, for a lot of drivers back then, often one was enough, and also they didn't necessarily want to keep taking risks. So he drove quite kind of placidly after that for several years and sort of part-time, and was like, I don't need to push for another one because I've got this one. But then also he got 5 consecutive pole positions in 1960, which for any driver, even in the modern era, doesn't happen very often. And yeah, he won the 12 Hours of Sebring 6 times, so he was really more well suited to sports cars and endurance racing. But then also, I think Damon Hill, God, his career was very topsy turvy. But yeah, really not. He was very lucky to be put in those rocket ships. I'm not a bit massive on James Hunt either, but it's kind of around that position. The thing, Oscar is great, but yeah, it is the lack of competition, because the comparisons made, like particularly 1996, having a rocket ship with 2 just substandard drivers in it. But then also with Villeneuve in 97, him and Schumacher only really went head to head like twice that year, but Villeneuve won it both times. When you look at what Lando's doing with Max and that. The other one that people have said with this McLaren is like, oh, we have 2016 Mercedes at home. It's that sort of thing as well. I mean, at this point, I have more or less accepted that Piastri is going to be champion. Max is going to push them as hard as he can, but the thing is, there are going to be too many races like Bahrain where the car just is not competitive and he can't fight for poles or podiums or whatever. Whereas McLaren, as it is, we haven't encountered any circuits they're actually weak at. I mean, there's going to be one eventually. I don't know if it's going to be Monaco or Singapore or Baku. There's going to be somewhere with very different characteristics that will throw them off, but it's not going to be enough to make a difference. But Lando is, I mean, admittedly, okay, he tried to go for the lunge at turn one. He then lost a lot of positions and had to make those up, and that ultimately cost him the win because he was catching Piastri at the end. But it was too little too late.
To your point about Monaco, about a track they're going to fall at, I think it would be Monaco, and I don't think it would be because of. I mean, obviously, yes, it's probably the bumpiest circuit on the calendar and the most abstract in terms of like you need a lot of downforce and you need a lot of certain things. But I do think that Lando and Oscar just would either be too scared to push the car to its limits because we do know that although yes, it's the fastest car and they shouldn't be bottling as much as they have, it is quite a temperamental car to drive. And if there's any circuit you don't want a temperamental car to drive, it's Monaco. And that's the only thing I'd say. That's the only thing.
If Max gets pole there, which he probably will, he'll win the race.
Obviously, there is a two-stop that they've got to do. Two-stop, and you have to.
Oh, of course, they're doing that, aren't they? Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, okay, call it artificial, but to be honest, Monaco needs it. Yeah. When you're going to be driving these stupid cars that we've had for the past 12 years that just don't work for that circuit.
I genuinely believe that what people will do is they'll do what they do in like Formula E, which is with the mandatory attack modes, which is where I genuinely think that because I think it is that you have to use all three tyre compounds as well. So it's not just two stops, it's all three tyre compounds. I think that someone's going to start on the hards on lap one, pit instantly, and go for the mediums and softs to the end.
2010 realness.
Yeah, because the only thing you'll really have then is track position. But if everyone's in a line from 1st to 20th, you can just sit in 20th, wait for everyone else to pit, and you just push.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. Like that. I mean, and Bruno Senna literally did that in 2010. He pitted on lap one, and that was his one pit stop for the whole race. I mean, he crashed at the end. No, he did. Oh no, that was Chandok. I think mechanical failure. I'm rusty on my HRT knowledge. You could do that. You could run and just wait for everyone else. But the thing is, then you're going to get like pit stop chicken. Everyone's going to run as long as possible and wait till everyone else pits, and it's such a stupid way. I can't stand it with tires and blah blah blah. Like it's like this is such a stupid way of racing. You're supposed to just push and be faster. You're not supposed to think, oh, if I make my tires go longer, I can then undercut them, and I don't have to do any actual fighting on track or whatever. But yeah, maybe I hope these 26 cars for Monaco, I'm hoping that's a better solution because they'll be smaller, active aero. Maybe it will bring the racing back because even barely 10 years ago, the racing was still reasonably good. It's just that the cars have gotten so much bloody bigger that you just can't overtake anymore.
Maybe that's Bernard's idea for Monaco and just have rain.
Yeah, rain would be great. I mean, well, apart from 22, but yeah, like Schumacher in 2006 went from the pit lane to 4th, and yes, he's Schumacher, but it was clearly possible to do it back then, and that was before we had DRS and KERS and blah blah blah.
I thought you had fuel strategy and pit strategy, but it wasn't as much.
Yeah, of a factor. But he even so, he still did like at least 10 overtakes on track or something in that race.
Yeah, I mean, Michael went to 4th. Kimi went from 16th to 8th the year after. We also saw many other drivers make up places those years. And I don't think it was just because of the, like you said, the size of the cars played a role in it. But I think there was more strategic variation back then. So people don't remember. It's like you could play with the fuel loads, you could play with the tires more. So, yeah, I think we're missing something. But we'll see how F1 addresses that. As long as the sport grows in popularity, I don't think they're gonna change much. But we should probably move on to the other teams, unless we have something else to add here.
We're kind of beating a dead horse.
I'll quickly add one more point on that, and then we can move on to I assume what will be Red Bull. What's it called? This is crazy because we're talking about drivers coming back from high grid positions. I'm pretty sure when John Watson got his wins in, was it Long Beach 83 and Detroit 83? They were from 23rd and 22nd. You can overtake on street circuits. It's just that nowadays.
I mean, it helps when 10 cars just retire because of mechanical failures as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so we'll do Mercedes next because, of course, George finished third. George is interesting because he's kind of just he's not really doing anything, but just moving forwards very silently, and you don't see much. Like we saw basically nothing of him in this race, except for because he benefited from the VSC, which put him ahead of Max, and then Max couldn't get past. But Antonelli was kind of all over the place because we saw, well, he got that pole position in the sprint, and everyone was like, where the fuck did that come from? And some people are saying he might have had a new engine, which would have helped. But then, his inexperience, he squandered the start and dropped to, fourth at turn 1. And then in the actual race, he was good at the start. I mean, he tried to take the lead from Max on the first lap, but then just the pace wasn't there, and he fell back, and he finished behind a Williams in the end. But Mercedes in general are in a reasonably good place, and they're doing actually quite well out of this, and they might sneak a win or two possibly at some point in the season, but not on pure pace, I don't think.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add one quick thing here. To me, Antonelli was both inexperienced and unlucky because he had a pretty bad pit stop, and that was right before the VSC came out. So Russell got the benefit of a cheap stop under the VSC, and then he got to put the mediums on because he started on hards, whereas Antonelli started on mediums. And that set up George's race because he came out ahead of Verstappen. He jumped both Antonelli and Verstappen. And then, during a weekend, George really didn't feel great with the car. He got a podium out of it because of the VSC more than anything, in my opinion. I'm not sure how you feel about that, Nedzo, but that's how I felt about it.
I mean, yeah, I saw a screenshot on Twitter earlier because someone was saying how George was one of the better drivers in the race, and someone put a screenshot before the VSC, and it was like Russell was like, I don't know, 5 seconds behind Antonelli. And yeah, I think Russell for me now is just becoming what Jenson Button was in the early 2010s. A solidly consistent driver, a nice competitor, and so someone who will get you decent, like 99% of what the car can achieve every single weekend. And with Antonelli, I think I agree with him being unlucky, not just in the race, but in the sprint, because all this time we've been told, oh, if you're ahead at the apex, you have the right to the corner. Or if you're not level at the apex, you don't have the right to the corner. But at the apex at turn 1 in the sprint, Piastri wasn't ahead. And he wasn't even alongside. It wasn't even front wing to front wing. He was behind at the apex, yet him forcing Antonelli wide because they made contact was deemed to be not his fault, or he was deemed to not have a penalty. I'm not sure if it was because it was in wet conditions or because of some other factor or some other variable. But in my opinion, if they're going to apply these rules that they hammered into us in Saudi Arabia when Max was not ahead at the apex, so Oscar had the right to force him off, and then Max had to give the position back. But it doesn't apply when it's Oscar Piastri all of a sudden. I'm not suggesting that that's why it doesn't apply, but I believe that it should be applied consistently.
I mean, people complain, like people and the drivers, sometimes they complain about these new rules, and so-and-so pushed me off, and it's like, yeah, but you voted for this. Like, we brought in these new rules over the winter about who's ahead of the apex and who's doing whatever. And like, it's just, this again I can't stand, is we're trying to choreograph and do this etiquette around overtaking. It's like 20, 30 years ago, it was don't cut the corner and you're fine, just barge past them if you have to, and it's all good. And now it's like, oh, well, you're slightly ahead of the apex, or you're doing this, or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, just, again, it's because the cars are bloody enormous, and the circuits are so badly designed that half the corners, you can't actually fit 2 people through them without one of them having to go off track. And there is the incentive to push them off track because of these enormous bloody runoff areas, instead of either grass or just a wall to shove them into and, lose your super license or whatever.
I believe there's 2 ways you can solve this. Either make the cars smaller, and so there are some corners, like for example at Miami, where like at the end of a long back straight, you are on the inside of someone. Even if you put on your anchors as hard as you can and try and turn as much as you can, you're still going to drift to the outside. You need to have it where people can actually turn and stay on the left hand side of a circuit, so the trajectory stays the same over the course of a circuit. Another thing is, what was I going to say? I was going to say make it self-policing. So if someone feels aggrieved, or if someone does a dodgy overtake, you can do the exact same thing to them back, and they won't, and they can't complain. I'm not suggesting like we should have what NASCAR is, where there's lots of retribution, because obviously in open wheel cars that doesn't work. And retribution, you just get front wings flying everywhere, and it'd be too chaotic and too risky. But
Yeah.
I think that an element of self-policing has to work, and also just make the cars more robust so that people. I know we don't want to see like lots of kamikaze moves because that's what partly contributing to the problems we have nowadays. But just make the cars slightly more robust. Make the cars slightly lighter. I know those are two sides of the same coin, but either make the cars lighter, make them more robust, or just make it better.
It's just that, yeah, because the cars are made of carbon fiber, which is supposed to be really light and basically bulletproof and incredibly strong. But you so much as look at them and they shatter into a million pieces. It's like they're made of glass a lot of the time. It's like, sure, I get that you need to have the wings break off because they act as like the crumple zones and stuff. But otherwise, why? I mean, again, the damage to Lawson's car from doing, I mean, self-inflicted, but it's punching holes in the floor and everything. And it's like, it's quite a small impact. Why is it doing so much damage when it should really be pretty impenetrable material?
Or here's an opportunity. Don't make the cars as aerodynamically dependent. Or if they are aerodynamically dependent, don't make it on a front wing or a rear wing. So I know we have, what is it, like 70% of a downforce is supposed to come from a ground effect nowadays. Why not make that 80% or 90% so the front wings are basically decoration like they were in the 80s? And then if someone does hit someone and lose like a part of their front wing or an end plate, it doesn't lose them like 0.5 of a second a lap. It loses them like a tiny bit and they can push on.
You know what? I completely agree with everything that's being said here, but the problem is that we don't really have a consistent way of really looking at any of these kind of incidents, because every single race something different happens, and every single race a different penalty or a different approach is taken, and it goes back to what I've always said: we need permanent stewards who are always the stewards. And until that happens, just get ready for people bending the rules, people not being deterred, and punishments giving out erratically, and also just not proper measures being taken to prevent certain incidents from happening. So, anyways, I don't have much else to say about that in particular. Yeah.
I think I don't think we realised how lucky we were as a sport to have Charlie Whiting, and I think since his passing, I think we've realised just like how much he held together the FIA and the stewarding process. Like, don't get me wrong, he had some blips that everyone did. He was in charge from, I think it was 1996 until 2019. He had Bianchi at Suzuka where he most likely should have deployed a safety car or red flag. He had, and that's pretty much the only blip in terms of pure driver safety. What were you doing? Since then, we've had like the amount of, I think I counted at the time, under Massey, we had about 10 or 11 different like safety infringements, safety vehicles being deployed at the wrong points, like inconsistent rulings. Like I think I counted like 10 or 11. And since like we had Nicholas Wittich and Eduardo Freitas, who even knows who they are anymore. Since those guys, and since the new guy Rui Marquez came in, it's just the same shit in a different package every single weekend. And it's is that you can push someone off a track? Oh no, you can't push someone off a track because of this. And then it's like just sit the drivers down in the room with the race director and say this is what we want. This is what we want to be allowed. This is what we don't want to be allowed. And then they go by that. And don't make it based on arbitrary lines. Make it based on actual racing precedent, and make it based on you have to leave a car's width. You don't have to leave a car's width under this circumstance. You do have to leave it under this circumstance. And then it's pretty done and dusted. You don't have situations like Alonso, Lawson. You don't have situations like Piastri and Antonelli, because drivers have incentive to actually leave room and incentive to just do well. It's just ridiculous, and it detracts from races. I'm pretty sure that what happened in the sprint probably killed Antonelli's confidence. And even though he was still doing well in the race and got caught by unluckiness, it's just ridiculous that we shouldn't be having these conversations. It feels like every single week. We had them in Jeddah, we had them this week, we had them loads of times throughout the season. And although yes, there are some main culprits, it's mostly Verstappen, it's mostly Norris, it has been Hamilton in the past couple of years. They're just gaming the system because they're the best drivers on the grid, and they'll be the ones who game it the most.
Yeah, I mean, Antonelli, I don't think he was expecting to get pole for the sprint. And yeah, the start went fine. But then also he got hit by Max in the pit lane, and that stopped him pitting himself. So he had to do another lap. But even that, he still got points because there was like an avalanche of penalties after the race. for everybody else. They really condensed. I mean, I've never seen so much stuff condensed into one sprint race, because we had the red flag and then 2 safety car starts and then the changing conditions and then 10,000 penalties for a race that's 20 laps long. There was a lot going on there. So he was just unfortunate on that front. But yeah, I was thinking, because people say new engine, maybe that's what that is, because otherwise that's quite a big performance gap to George after only 6 races it's been now.
Oh yeah, and I think it's been tough, but also I think Antonelli has impressed me anyways, and he's going to learn this year, but he's shown he has the speed, and I think that's the tough part. If you have the speed, then you can build on that. If you don't have the speed, it becomes really tricky quickly. So he's just got to keep his head. George is on form, and I'm sure Antonelli's frustrated he can't beat George yet, but he'll get there. He was already ahead of George this weekend on pure pace. So I think the promising thing is it looks like they have the second quickest car on the grid right now. So Mercedes are in a good position. They've got 2 good drivers. They've got a really quick car. Who would have thought after last year? So let's see where that takes them. But, Red Bull have something that Mercedes don't, and that's Max Verstappen. And this may be a good segue to get to Red Bull.
Because even if that car is technically second fastest, only one of their 2 drivers can drive it like it's the second fastest car. But so the sprint, the pit exit, that wasn't his fault, but how it goes is the driver gets the penalty for that. So then this was the first time he'd finished a race outside the points since Spa 2016, apparently, because he plummets from 4th to 17th with that 10-second penalty at the end of the sprint. And I was like, I'm sure that there have been races more recently than that where he finished outside the points, but maybe not actually. So that's quite impressive. But he got pole, and we saw the kind of fighting that he knows he can do with the McLarens, but the pace wasn't there, and apparently it wasn't there to get past the Red Bull, to get past the Mercedes either. But then Tsunoda, I mean, again, it's just getting annoying because he got knocked out in Q1 at the sprint and then blagged his way into the points because of all the penalties and pitting at the right time. And then in the race, he got that 5-second penalty, but just scraped 10th place. And we didn't really see anything of him. And it's people were getting excited when he first moved over because his driving style works for it. But it's like, at this point, he's better than Lawson, yes, but he's still just doing what every other driver has done, and it's just getting frustrating now.
When I saw him in Bahrain, I thought he had promise because he was only a small margin behind Max, and I was like, if this is what he can do, it's good. But then it seems obviously Bahrain was an uncompetitive weekend for the car, so it seems that when the car is reasonably competitive in the hands of Verstappen, the second driver falters, and it's just the same. Like I always said, like where the gaps between Gasly and Verstappen, Albon and Verstappen, Perez and Verstappen, they're all roughly the same. Like if you look at the quali gaps, they're all around 5-6 tenths. If you look at the average race gaps, they're all between 35 and 45 seconds on average. Like it's just the same. It's just the same thing coated in a different substance, and that's just the underwhelming problem. The overwhelming problem at Red Bull is they have a car that's designed for one driver, and people can say, "Oh, they don't design the cars in a certain way." Of course they do. They design cars to be front end heavy, or they design them to be stable. They do that. That's what they've done throughout history. And that's what they'll always do. And that's just what it is with Verstappen. And you can talk about drivers who have certain similar styles, same styles. Lawson had a similar style to Verstappen. Look where it ended up. Perez had has a completely opposite style to Verstappen and was just as good as guys like Albon and Gasly. Doesn't make much difference if you just can't if you can't drive a car that's designed around one guy. And Red Bull in the future, if they want to keep Verstappen, because it's not even a given they're going to keep Verstappen for more than another 1 or 2 years. If they are going to keep Verstappen and they want to win Constructors' Championships, they need to neutralise the car. But if they want to win Drivers' Championships, they need to not neutralise the car and just keep going and not complain about their second driver being slower. It's a tough margin to think. But what do they do if Verstappen goes? We've talked about this, but because Verstappen could go to Aston Martin, he's talked about he will not stay in F1 if he doesn't feel happy. And he's not as obliged like Schumacher was and like Hamilton was to break and equal and create new records. He doesn't have that same thing. He will just go off to WEC and do his own thing, or go off and do his sim racing with his children and turn them into the next robotic racers who can win whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. And what do Red Bull do then? They've got a car that's designed for a guy who doesn't race in the sport anymore, and they've got Arvid Lindblad and Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda begging for a car that they actually want to drive.
Yeah, I think that Max is holding that team together in many ways, and when he goes, probably so will a lot of talent. I think he did the best he could as well in the race. I don't think the car had the tire life or the characteristics to do much better, and it seemed like he had some kind of a braking issue in addition to overheating. So the track had a lot of degradation, so the cars that overheated their tires and were not good at tire management suffered. The Red Bull has that flaw, which is why I put it behind the Mercedes, and Max just did miracles with it. His teammate was barely ahead of the other RB. I mean, Tsunoda just hung on by the skin of his teeth to avoid being penalized down to 11th because he had a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, and Hadjar was just outside the 5 seconds. So,
I mean, in qualifying, and he was 10th and Max was on pole. I thought he was going to do another lap. And I was like, come on, man, really? You're 3/4 of a second off your teammate. And I thought it was that thing, because this happens usually with the midfield teams like Alpine and whoever. When they get to Q3, they do a really half-assed lap. And I was like, I wouldn't mind seeing you actually do a proper one, because there's always this, 8th, 9th, 10th, there's always a whole second added on, because they're not interested in going for pole. It's like, why not give it a go? Just see how close you can get. And I thought that was the case with him. It's like, no, that was just how much he could do after already getting knocked out in Q1 for sprint qualifying. But yeah, again, because you mentioned Bahrain, it's the same with every other driver. They get close to Max when the car sucks, basically, is how it seems to go. And I'm not sure I don't know why that is necessarily. Something about it just stops clicking with Max, even though Max is known for being extremely adaptable. But it's a strange one. But at the moment, he's just not. Again, they're still going to be losing out in constructors to Mercedes and possibly Ferrari at this rate.
I mean, in that one race in Baku in 2024, when Perez turned up for once, I mean, he was second and Verstappen was 12th. I think that was partly because, well, I don't think Baku was really a track that Max likes. It was a mix of that. It was a track that Perez loves. It's a car style that Perez loves with that understeer, and it's a car. It was literally a mix of all of the factors for Perez and all the ones against Verstappen in that weekend. It is just a bad situation for them. How do you? They're a team that they will not win constructors championships like this. We've said that, and it will be like what Brabham was in the early '80s, where they have Nelson Piquet in the main car, and then they have whichever other bum or whichever other pay driver they can get in the second seat. It doesn't really matter, like Hector or Rabat. I know Riccardo Patrese wasn't really a pay driver or a bum, but he wasn't world championship level. Let's be honest.
He was De Cesaris without the crashing, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, if that's how they want to do it, cool. But they can't keep chopping and changing drivers. You get 2 races, you get 10 races, you get this many races, and complain about the results. Obviously, it's going to be the case. Just stick with one guy, whether it be Perez, whether it be Tsunoda, whether it be Lawson. Just go. You're in that seat. You're gonna suffer for a season, and then you're gonna suffer for 2 seasons, and then once Verstappen goes, we'll give you a car that you want.
I mean. Admittedly, I don't know, maybe Max was a bit distracted because he turned up a day late because he's now a dad or whatever. I mean, of course, for anyone who doesn't know that already, because Crofty was obsessing over it and everyone on social media calling him daddy now and whatnot. I think Lando was joking, I hoped he would have lost a bit of pace now that he's a dad or whatever. But yeah, to be honest, that might have done, because it's like, yeah, I'm a dad, and now I have to fuck off to one of the worst tracks on the calendar and try and win, and then come back or whatever. But yeah, it just got a bit. It got like last night after the race, every other tweet was Oscar doing that little tap dance thing in Parc Ferme, and for the whole weekend before that, it was like, oh, Daddy Max is a daddy, blah blah blah, and it's just like, yes, I know, I can reproduce, bathe in my virility. It's just a bit too. Just a bit too obsessive, I think. Also, I think, yeah, because the baby's a girl, so that kind of takes away the element of, are we going to have our next 10-time champion? Because, yeah, she can do Formula Academy, but as we've seen, there are certain things in place that mean that modern Formula 1 cars just don't really work for the female form, should we say. But yeah.
Yeah, I think some drivers in the lower categories have expressed perhaps some physical assistance being given to female drivers. We'll see. I mean,
Mm.
Jamie Chadwick was quite talented, but she never really made it to F1. So we'll see if
She's
somebody else comes
mid
along.
as fucking Indy Next and Frecker. So, but there was I've forgotten her name now. But one of the ones that did W Series, she only did it because it was free and because of exposure. Because she's never had any issues in single seaters. She was explaining like the issue is like female drivers, they're the perfect size for a Formula One car because they're like what 5'3", 5'4", and size and weight is that. But they can't. It's that there's no power steering, so the steering is really heavy. And from Formula 3 up, when the downforce really kicks in the aero, that's when it becomes too difficult. Because at Formula 4 level, they're kind of on par because the aero is kind of non-existent at that point. But also the steering wheel, it's harder for them to grip it because it's quite large as well.
Yeah.
And it's just little things like that that might make it more accommodating without necessarily taking anything away from the men as well. Other than maybe they don't have to train quite as hard if the steering is not going to be as heavy.
It's a missed opportunity because I never cared about this, but personally, if people did want to see a woman, Bernie Eccleston had a chance, and Bernie didn't want to bring a woman into F1. He said it himself. He said something very disparaging, which I'm not going to repeat. But well, he said that basically women shouldn't be in F1. But and this was back in 2005. But in 2005, Danica Patrick got pole at the Indy 500. And it was huge. I remember as a Formula One fan, suddenly all the headlines were about Danica Patrick, and she really was in 2005 just like a mega star. I mean, everybody was talking about her, and you were just like, who is this person? And it would have been interesting to see her at the top of her game in a Formula One car, just to see if this is a Formula One specific issue, or if Danica was just talented enough and the other women are not as talented. And that's the issue, because I think we missed something there. It would have been interesting to see, could Danica at least race in the midfield or close to the top in Formula One in those years? And we don't know the answer to that, if there is a real physical discrepancy or hindrance. But I suspect the really talented ones, like Danica, I mean, she wasn't the best driver in the world, but she had considerable talent. I'm sure Layla Lombardi and some of these other, Hella Lauterberg before she passed away. I think a lot of these female drivers could have cut it in Formula One, at least in a midfield level. So it's important that when we see a good one, we put him in a Formula One car just to see, like, is this physically possible? Because so many people keep saying this, and some of the female racers keep saying it, that it's not physically feasible. But we should see that when a good one comes along, and just for our own understanding. Anyways,
Yeah,
what you said reminded me of that, so I just thought about bringing it up.
I mean, Danica, she was huge at the time, and everyone loved her, and now everyone hates her because she's a MAGA milf. So
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think she could have become even bigger than what she became, because I rarely saw so much attention up until Lewis Hamilton made his debut, and then it was like, wow, that was a lot.
Was it
of attention.
2007 when she won that race at Motegi?
2008.
I think
2008.
Yeah. But I actually think her pole at Indianapolis made even more headlines. It was crazy when she got
Was it
that
the Indy
pole.
500?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where did she
that
finish
was
in
just-
that race? Do you remember? Where did she finish?
While Nedzo continues his point, I'll look that up.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think she may have retired from that race. I think it might have been some sort of mechanical problem. But essentially, Kyra briefly mentioned it. Is it an F1 problem or is it a motorsport problem? I think it's an F1 problem because we've seen in other, as I said, Danica Patrick, perfect example. Don't get me wrong, she was not a world beater in IndyCar. She was not a generational multi-time champion level driver. But I think had she stayed in IndyCar and not gone to NASCAR for the money, I think she would have become a champion. Because before she went in, I think it was 2011 was the last season. She'd won that race in 2008, and I think that year she finished fifth in points. It wasn't just she won; she was very consistent throughout, and she'd proved herself to be I'm pretty sure that. Carry on. I assume you're going to tell us what happened in that Indy race.
She finished fourth, and she did a really good job. She almost won the race. She was leading with 10 laps to go, so that's impressive.
The thing is, isn't IndyCar supposed to be even more physical than Formula One? Because that's what Armstrong and Ilott both said when they joined it.
It's more physically. It's more physically demanding in terms of your arms and stuff like that. But I think obviously because it's slower. There's not as much.
Like Formula E, aero is basically non-existent because it's all low-speed corners, except for the ovals.
It's not really. It's just the fact that they're like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or at some points 15 seconds of an F1 cars. I think, as I said, they do still go to some like Barber Motorsport Park where they've just went this weekend. If you said that was just slow-speed corners, people would laugh at you. But it is the case that, like, as I said, Danica Patrick has proven herself in IndyCar. Catherine Legg proved herself in IndyCar. Like, we've had so many other drivers come through, and like we saw, they say that Group B rally cars are the hardest ever rally cars to drive, and who was at the top of the game? Michelle Mouton. Women have proved themselves. Women have proved themselves in motorsport. They don't need to prove themselves in motorsport. It's just that F1 is the biggest motorsport in the current climate. And they can't get in because of, I believe it is probably physical strength to an extent, but we need someone who's actually, because Jamie Chadwick was never going to cut it. I'm sorry, she just, like we saw in her other junior series results, she wasn't as good as the other drivers. Let's be honest. Like, it's just,
I think with her, it's disappointing because it's like she was average in Frecker and Indy Next, but then because she annihilated all the girls in W Series, it's like, what does it say about them?
Yeah, because she's going to beat them. Yeah, there's the same example of in NASCAR. There was a girl called Hayley Deegan. She competed in ARCA West or ARCA East. I can't remember which one it was. Which is basically like regional F4, like what regional F4 is. And she was dominating. She was winning races. She was coming second. She was doing all sorts. And then she moved up to the higher tiers. And then she just flopped. She got put in the Truck Series, flopped. Got promoted to the Xfinity Series, flopped, and then is now doing IndyCar and was flopping. Like. The modern standard of female drivers, I feel, is lower than what it was in the 2000s, what it was in the 1980s, where they had to progress up the ladder on merit, and they had, because obviously you could argue sexism and stuff. They had to fight through more barriers than they do nowadays. Nowadays, I'd argue they fight through less barriers than they would naturally, because they just promoted by money, by sponsored by F1 Academy. This is why I say that it's just a parade, and that it's a procession, and it shouldn't be there. They should put all the funding from F1 Academy into grassroots things, getting thousands and hundreds of thousands more women into motorsport in general, so that the pool of drivers is bigger to begin with, rather than just saying, oh, here's a couple of million to put 20 women who aren't good enough into Formula 4 cars.
We need to see a woman win something which is one of the really big titles, such as IndyCar, or to win Le Mans, or be part of the title-winning hypercar WEC squad, because that's the thing. Again, in endurance racing, women are quite good. Like Iron Dames do very well in WEC and Le Mans. You need something like that, because otherwise it's just going to get ignored. And a lot of motorsport that isn't Formula One gets easily forgotten about and overlooked. But yeah, it needs to be one of the really big significant tasks, because otherwise it's Jamie Chadwick winning the W Series and like British GT cars. And something is like, that doesn't count. Like maybe British touring cars, you can say fair enough, but not fucking GT cars.
Yeah, where can Le Mans do also? That's another thing that proves, again, endurance racing. It does what it says on the tin. You need to be physically fit to do endurance racing, and women do well there. So it's clearly not a problem. Overall fitness is clearly not a problem. It's just that when it comes to G forces and stuff, like you see the size of Fernando Alonso's neck, it's wider than his head. Like, yeah, when it gets to those top levels where marginal gains mean everything, where being slightly less fit costs you 2/10, and where being slightly off concentration, slightly off kilter, slightly off emotion costs you half a second, it adds up, and that's what happens. That's why you see women go into tests and go into other things, and then they quote unquote get embarrassed by all of the fucking Andrew Tate stands, and it's not that. It's just that you get what I'm saying. They aren't necessarily doing badly because they're not good enough. It's because the systems that are in place in modern motorsport, with how fast the cars are and how much G-force they are, is designed for them to fail, essentially.
It just depends. The thing is, there are ways to do it that doesn't necessarily hamper aero, because Adrian Newey is always the one that said, there's this one really annoying component about the car, and that's the driver that messes up the aero. And what I want to do is, like, you don't need to change the aero. You just, like you said, power steering, because I think they do have it. It's the feeder series that don't have power steering. Yeah. So Formula One has it, but for some reason F3 and F2 don't have it, and that's like, but all the top level series do, so I don't know why they don't give it. And it's like, that doesn't help, because those cars drive like absolute arse as well, especially Formula 2. And yeah, maybe try and redesign the steering wheel so they can grip it a bit better, or find someone that's built like Brienne of Tarth or whatever, and that's not a problem.
Steering wheels.
Yeah, just little things like that, and see if they can actually deal with it. Because I get why they wouldn't want to necessarily hamper aerodynamic efficiency just to make it easier to drive, because then the cars will just get slower, or start putting in technical regs which are designed to make it easier for women. I don't know. Especially if they still we don't get a woman in Formula One off the back of that.
Yeah. Look, we should probably get to Williams,
Oh.
but before we get to Williams, I'll just say that the likes of Jamie Chadwick, Williams's FP1 debutante Susie Wolf, Haley Deegan, that Hamda Al Khabaisi, whoever she is, Alicia Palmowski.
You're just reading off the F1 Academy list, aren't you?
These people are just, they're not cutting it. Okay?
Yeah.
Juju Noda, they're not cutting it.
Illegal car o'clock.
This is not good enough.
Fucking
and
Bianca Bustamante, and I mean, she's just an influencer.
What a
now.
distracted young girl that was. She went on the radio. I remember that, how cringe that was. And she started singing a song about Max Verstappen. I would have just told her to park it there and go shopping because it's just unacceptable. So, I mean, this is not, and people make fun of Danica, but Danica Patrick was on another level to these people. And I give her that credit. She was a real racer. You could say she made some mistakes, but she deserved to be there. And she got pole on merit at Indy. And she raced the wheels off that thing. And she was not afraid of the guys. And she would have several great performances and some not so great performances. So Danica showed that the level doesn't have to come down for women. She went in there and she beat the guys a few times. And she did it on merit. And everyone else just seems to be whining and complaining about why there are no women. Well, Danica wasn't whining and complaining. Danica went through hell in the junior series and she made it. So
she didn't need any female role models because she became that role model. That's when they say, we need representation. It's like, no, you just need to knuckle down and get it done. And if you're good enough, then you're good enough. Like,
absolutely. And so, I think that's, people need to realize, like, this is not a sport where it's even safe to bring someone who isn't ready. Because there would be nothing more tragic than Formula One forcing a female driver into the sport and then she hurts herself because she's not ready. What a tragedy that would be. So let's be honest. We're not being discriminatory. We're not, we have no preference here about genders. We're just saying that it should be merit-based and not just for the sake of the sport, but for the sake of the person who's coming through. F1, even though it's not the F1 of 30 years ago, and the cars are still very much skewed towards how quick the car is. Sorry, what I'm trying to say here is that the results are still skewed towards how quick your car is rather than the driver. F1 is still a dangerous and incredibly skillful sport. You cannot push someone in there from a marketing perspective, and we should not be dropping standards for the entry into the sport. So I'll end it there and say that if we do get a woman, I hope it's a really good one because there have been some really good ones in the past.
Maybe a Lily Verstappen, 20 years time.
Fantastic.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, so Williams, goodness, they really turned around this weekend.
They did.
I think Carlos, I mean, okay, the race was a bit scrappy, but he's clearly cracked the code and seems to understand the car better. Both of them were in Q3 outright. They both made points. I mean, they did simultaneous overtakes on both Ferraris, wasn't it? I think at one point in the race as well, or something. Yeah, well, okay, it's one race and the car's good. I don't know if it will last because it's Williams and that team is just made of pure depression. But yeah, very impressive to put themselves effectively fourth fastest this race.
Yes, I thought they did a tremendous job. Albon had a very good race. I think the drivers were close, weren't they? They were dicing it out, or having a nice little dice and dueling it out. But I think something happened to Sainz in the race. I think he, first of all, started the race on a used compound, and he actually hit Alex at the start, and it damaged his floor, apparently. So going forwards from that, he just, he had a good race, but he lost positions where Albon didn't. And I don't know if that's just down to Sainz not adapting fully yet to the car, or it was because of that floor damage. But he ended up P9 at the end of the day, and Albon just did an amazing job because not only did he finish fifth, he finished ahead of a Mercedes. And the Mercedes is definitely quicker than the Williams. So the car looks really good. The drivers are performing. Sainz is improving, and it's a shame that Hamilton turned into Sainz because that's what happened. I think Sainz could have probably finished one position higher, but very positive results. And again, a great platform for them to continue their growth this season. I'm
Okay.
not sure if you guys agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Albon was fine. He did well. Carlos, I mean, he gave us a mini through goes Hamilton moment and lost 2 places at once, and then tried to catch Lewis. And yeah, but by their standards, it was good, I guess. So yeah, this seemed to be a grid of 2 halves because there was a very noticeable difference between the top 5 and the bottom 5. Because the top 5 teams, both drivers finished in the points, but the bottom 5 teams did hardly anything all weekend really, and there's not much of them. I suppose one of the ones that was a bit more eventful was Racing Bulls, because Hadjar, well, he was battling Lewis at the early on in the race, and then he ran wide at turn 1 and gave him that position, when otherwise he probably could have held it because there was very little position change up at the front during the first stint. But then Lawson decided to take out Alonso in the sprint race, and then he goes and takes out Doohan at the start of the main race as well, and then that wrecks his own race, and it's like, yeah, that's not the weekend you needed really at the moment.
I'm instantly going to come in here and say, I don't. Again, with the current rule set, it might be Lawson's fault, but I will always maintain that when someone gets forced off circuit and they have no avenue to rejoin, apart from stopping and having to give up any sort of position, I don't think that's right. And I've said this because a lot of people have compared it with an incident that happened in past in Formula One. I know I compared it as well. And I've mentioned this driver so much in the past couple of weeks and the past couple of months, and I think Ciaron knows what's coming.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
When Lewis Hamilton pushed Pastor Maldonado off the circuit in Valencia in 2012, I said then, and I'll say, I didn't say then because I was only 8 years old, but I said then, and I'll say now, that kind of incident is always on the inside driver. Why are you forcing them off a circuit and then expecting them to just disappear when they rejoin? Leave them the room to begin with, and you don't have that problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
Totally agree.
And that's the thing with Doohan is like that crash is not Doohan's fault. Like that's just because he couldn't be closer to the apex and more on the because he was basically riding the curbs, like going and then having to turn like that because Liam just turned straight on him and yeah, completely wrecks his race. And Liam, well, it turns into a test session and then they give up because there's holes in the side pod and the radiator and blah blah blah. And yeah, having already had the collision with Alonso in the sprint race as well, just not really the best from him. Because that's the thing, everyone thought he sort of refound his mojo, like he's faster than he was in the Red Bull, but he's still just kind of average and just kind of there or thereabouts with Hadjar. And he did, like, he originally scored points in the sprint until getting a penalty for the collision. So it's just, he's turning, I don't know, he's becoming one of the flops of the season. It's been very disappointing how everything's gone so far with him.
Yes. Well, I think Lawson's confidence has taken a hit. He just looks depressed to me. And yeah, he's showing some speed, but you could just, that energy he had last year isn't there. He was so vocal last year. He was so almost aggressive constantly. You just feel like something has dampened, almost like he knows that his time in F1 could be up very soon because, like you both mentioned, that Lindblad bloke looks a bit good, and Lawson looks a bit bad right now. He's running into things. He's getting beaten first by Max Verstappen. Now Hadjar's beating him. Why on earth would they keep him? Why on earth would they keep him?
Lawson, he thought he was a Dom top, and it turns out he's a power bottom. That's what's happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I'll yeah.
Don't say
I'm
we'll
not sure
pass
to say
it
that,
on
but
a comment on that.
yeah, no comment on that. But I think he's found that he's perhaps in an unfavorable position, and he's depressed about it because he had so much going for him last year. I remember that duel he had with Fernando Alonso, the great Fernando Alonso. and he came out on top. And everybody, including myself, was like, "Wow, that guy has so much character." He just went up against Fernando Alonso and beat him in a one-on-one duel. Christian Horner referenced it when they signed him, and now look at him, destroyed in those races by Max Verstappen. I mean, that was painful to watch. And then he looked completely like a lost soul when he got dropped. And now he's getting beaten by Hadjar. The writing's on the wall. If he doesn't pick this up quickly, and by quickly I mean by the next race, this guy is going to be out of F1 sooner than than you can imagine. Because I think Red Bull are already making moves with some of the young talent they have, and Lawson doesn't even come from a country that, I mean, it's a good country to be in if there's a nuclear fallout. I think New Zealand is probably the best country to be in. But apart from that, it doesn't have much. It's not an economic powerhouse. It's not a country that will attract major sponsors. Liam's got to get there based on talent. He's got to stay based on talent. He doesn't have Maldonado's PDVSA, oil barons coming in and just bankrolling his career. He doesn't have Carlos Slim bankrolling him. He doesn't have Lawrence Stroll bankrolling him.
He needs a dictator to.
Yeah.
That's what all the other drivers have, but New Zealand doesn't have those. So,
Right
yeah.
then, he needs to pop on by to the King of Oman and see what he's doing. It's as simple as that, I guess. That's it.
I was going to say, you know how the what's it called, the native Indian tribes in America, they like set up casinos and stuff, and they've sponsored NASCAR teams in the past. Maybe what we should get I don't know what they call the Maori tribes in New Zealand to set up casinos, and then they sponsor Liam Lawson, and that creates a perfect harmonious situation for him. But yeah, it is with Lawson. It's an interesting. I've just looked at the incident because I initially forgot what happened. I actually don't blame Lawson for that because which year was it? Last year where you had Hamilton go on the inside of Alonso, Stroll, and Norris and take them all out in one fell swoop at turn one because he dived at the inside. What I saw with that really from Doohan.
Well, no, no. Doohan wasn't diving. Like, this is Lawson just kind of comes out of nowhere on the onboards. Like, that's the thing. You look at Doohan. He's already on the inside because you would be, but then he's just left with nowhere to go because Lawson is just turning straight in on him.
Okay, let me have a look at that again. Hold on. You two keep talking.
But the other two, Hadjar. I said my thing on Hadjar. There's not much to say on him, and yeah. Who's next? Yeah,
Look,
okay.
Well, Ferrari have to be spoken about, guys. We forgot Ferrari.
Oh shit!
We forgot Ferrari.
I think we need to
sorry.
touch on that. I thought we did.
How did I forget Ferrari?
Because it was so much, and we could speak probably another 2 hours on Ferrari. So we need to, pick the important things because this team has not changed since ever. They just pretend to change. And then they drop a Rory Byrne is working on our car, get excited article at some point. I mean, this was a perfect example of an operationally inferior team with two drivers who are just really frustrated. So, I mean, one of them started on the hard tire, Hamilton, and then Leclerc started on the medium. And Hamilton did a really good job. He went through the field. He had a free pit stop under the VSC and was right behind Leclerc. Everything was going well until he got behind Leclerc, and then there was a bit of an argument about why am I stuck behind him, and Lewis was basically saying he needs to let me by. And then when that happened, then Lewis was no quicker because I guess Lewis's mediums ran out of tire life, and then Lewis was asked to let Charles back through, at which point Lewis did, and then said, "Do you want me to let the Williams behind as well?" sarcastically. And numerous times Lewis was calling out his team for being too slow, sipping some tea. This was a very sarcastic and frustrated driver, but he clearly had pace. And I think Leclerc did have pace, but was complaining about the car. So I don't know. This car, some races looks like the second quickest, and then there's this weekend like this that it looks like the fourth quickest. So it just clearly didn't get the balance right. And it's something that once they do get that balance right for both drivers, they're right on pace with Mercedes. But when they don't, both drivers are just sliding around and they're fourth quickest. So it looks like the car's a bit on edge with the setup, but I think it's just the car's speed is fixable, But when you see all these just back and forth between driver and engineer and the frustration creeping through, I think that's a bigger problem. I don't think the team is as operationally competent as its peers, and yeah, that's why they finished seventh and eighth. Unacceptable.
My take on this situation. First of all, don't get me wrong. Ferrari were a bit stupid in not deciding literally on the first lap where they saw there was going to be a problem where they're both on the same piece of tarmac. Either you go through or you don't. But I swear I remember, wasn't there a Hungary one year when Rosberg was Hamilton's teammate? Rosberg came on the blower and said, "I need to be let through. I'm on the faster tyre." And what did Hamilton say? "If he's faster, he can overtake me."
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like
because that was for a championship. So I think Hamilton would act differently if it's for a title. I think for seventh and eighth in a car Lewis is not happy with yet. I think he sees the bigger picture.
Okay, fair enough then. But it's still shocking to me how this whole situation. Like Lewis joined this team. I'm not sure he fully thought this move through. Like we saw with Mercedes, he listened to Niki Lauda. He pulled off one of the greatest driver transfers in history. But it seems like unless he genuinely went to Ferrari just to tick a box and he's not told anyone, this genuinely seems like one of the worst transfer moves in F1 history. In terms of he's gone from a team that's now consistently, it wasn't at the time consistently second quickest, but now it's consistently second quickest to a team that is fourth most of the time and second on a good day, and is like operationally just stupid. It seems like Ferrari just needs someone at the top, like a Jean Todt, like a Ross Brawn, to just make those final decisions because they are slow to make these decisions. It should have been within a lap. It should have been within a lap. You say, do you let him through or do you not? And do we execute it immediately or do we not? And they just didn't. And do I believe that would have made a difference? Do I believe that Lewis would have then powered on and overtook the guys in front of him? No, that wouldn't have happened because we saw that. Like, you aren't going to lose however much time that Lewis lost behind shot. You aren't going to, like, we saw how his performance on those mediums. It wasn't groundbreaking when he got by. This is just a problem we have with Ferrari. People have talked about their incompetent strategies, their awful radio interchanges with Charles Leclerc and his water bottle earlier on in the season. It's how can a team be as storied and as successful, and now look where they are. Now they don't have drivers pounding around Fiorano every day of every week of every year of every decade, and now they don't. Like, now they're limited by the cost cap. And I know Mercedes is the same and Red Bull is the same, and they aren't struggling as much. But it's just like, what do we do? I mean, Lewis, don't get me wrong, he's always been passive aggressive and been a bit arrogant at times. But he's never been outright sarcastic like that on the radio, at least not since his McLaren days, even. So I think he's really at the end of his tether. And it's like, what did you expect going to Ferrari? Unless you just didn't think that aspect of the move through. Like, what did he expect?
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
agree.
it's good to see that, you know, the human resources department at Ferrari has made sure they're sticking by the principles of equality and diversity, because Lewis is getting the same treatment that Leclerc and Vettel and Alonso and Kimi and everyone else has gotten there. Like, this hasn't been a free ride. They clearly haven't sorted out their strategy. Now he's having to make the calls because he didn't have to do that at Mercedes, but he does with Ferrari. And we saw that in the sprint race that he called, and he was like, "No, we'll pit now, and I'll do softs," and it got him a podium. Leclerc, of course, I mean, he crashed on the way to the grid for the sprint race. I mean, of course it was him. Who else would it be, like, other than the window licker? But yeah, so that didn't help him. But it was just interesting that Lewis passes him, and then immediately Leclerc's like, "Can you speed up? He's ruining my tyres," and they do let him back through. The thing is, I think they told Lewis that they were that he was going to let you through before they told Leclerc he has to do that, which is why it took ages or something. It's just little things like this. There was some article this morning saying that, like, Lewis said that Fred Vasseur went to speak to him after the race, and he just said to Fred, like, "Dude, don't be so sensitive," or whatever, because I think upper management are not happy with the comments he was making on the radio or whatever. And it's like, people have said worse. I mean, Vettel used to basically run the entire pit wall from the cockpit when he was driving. And that's on them for making, because again, Lewis is used to high standard teams that run competently. He's not used to this. So it's no wonder he's getting frustrated by it.
That's exactly it, Peter. And Nedzo touched on it too. I don't think he realizes how much more incompetent Ferrari are to the precise environments he was before. I want to be careful how I phrase this because I know we have some passionate Ferrari fans among us, but I just think that Kimi said something, and I don't want to make this about Kimi. I just want to say an anecdote that Kimi said that was very insightful. And he said that when we work as a team, it means everything needs to be done properly. And he was basically criticizing Ferrari in 2014. And he was saying, if I ask for my ride height to be X amount, it should be X amount. It shouldn't be 1 millimeter less. If I ask for a setup to be done a certain way, it should be done exactly as I want, even if it means we stay later and do it. And he was basically making a jab at Ferrari that they're not precise and that they're disorganized. And I think Hamilton has been in the most precise and organized teams, Mercedes, McLaren. And I think on top of adapting, he's realizing there's just a lot of baggage with this team. And on top of that, they don't really allow their drivers to be their own personalities in the way McLaren and Mercedes do, because Ferrari are a very proud team. They fired Alain Prost for insulting their car. Even though they paid Lewis 100 million, if they really feel like he's insulting them, they will fire him too. And I think Lewis is starting to realize this team is really not on the level of the teams he was at before. And we'll see how he handles that. Will he rise to the occasion, or will he look for an exit strategy before it gets ugly next year? So I think I just want to say I agree with that, with both your points. One, Peter's point that he isn't used to this level of incompetence and disorganization. And two, Nedzo's point that, in fact, he may not have thought this move out through and it was too economic driven rather than performance driven. But we'll see, because honestly, his pace when he's got the car hooked up is really good compared to Leclerc's. And I think if he keeps that up, who knows what could happen. He's definitely not that much slower than Leclerc. Leclerc has the edge, but Lewis has shown that when the car's hooked up, he can match Leclerc in the races quite easily. So he can still do great things at Ferrari, but you can just see that frustration creeping in. That's what I inferred from the race in Miami.
There's two things I'm going to quickly say. First of
Yeah.
all, I can give my, because I didn't get to do earlier, I'll give my take on the Hamilton Sainz incident. I do believe that Lewis turned in, but I also believe that Sainz went for a gap that wasn't there. I think it was a racing incident, like the steward said, it was a racing incident. I believe that Sainz, as Martin Brundle has historically said, a day late and a dollar short, and it was. But Lewis, you could see he did turn in early. He did a Prost Suzuki 1989.
Yeah,
And secondly,
I agree.
Yeah, and secondly, I think Team LH and I think Lewis himself. I think we might be able to see now the 8th championship isn't coming. Like, I mean, some of them probably still think it's existed since 2021 and just been withheld. But in terms of in the record books, I think even if the Ferrari in 2026 is championship level, which there's no signs it's going to be, considering the Mercedes engine advantage, considering just where they are operationally and performance-wise. Like, Lewis can't even beat Leclerc, never mind Antonelli, Russell, Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri in faster cars. So why is it so? Like, the amount of hurdles he's going to have to jump over. He hasn't had to jump over hurdles in his career, not since he joined McLaren at the age of 13. He's had backing all the way, and he just doesn't have that. He doesn't have that level like we saw with Verstappen. We've seen with Schumacher. We've seen with other guys. They've managed to pull bad cars to good results, and he just hasn't. So
yeah, he'd have the same experience that Vettel had in 2017 and 2018, where the car is equal, if not faster, than the Mercedes, but the strategies are so stupid, and the way that they choreograph things with the other teammate just messes everything up and gave the Mercedes a free ride because they could do whatever they want and it would always outmaneuver Ferrari. It's going to be that thing. Yeah, the car might be fast, but if your strategies are that stupid, and also Leclerc is not going to be compliant, then it's not going to be easy for you.
Yeah, and I think it's strange. Like Leclerc has these weekends where he says he's not happy with the car, but you feel like Lewis is still not there with the car either in terms of setup. So he's still learning with this team, and if he ever wants to achieve anything, he needs to get over that, find a good baseline with the setup, and then hopefully carry that into next year, because I feel like this year is just going to be a very tough year for him, where he's learning about the team and how to set the car up, hopefully to set him up for a brilliant 2026. Otherwise, like you guys say, he's got no chance if this continues. It's just not hooked up in the way that the past 10 years was like second nature for Lewis when he drove those Mercedes cars, wasn't it? So this is part of the risk you take when you leave a team. People think it's easy to just jump from one car to the other car. It's just like anything in life, you know. Imagine if you've, you know, been in an environment and then suddenly you go to a new job and everything is different. It takes you time to get used to that environment, and that's what we're seeing. And who knows if this will ever resolve? But you know, there's some positive signs, but a lot of work to be done in that team still.
So yeah, let's move to one of their customer teams and outside of the top 5, although we already did Racing Bulls or whatever they're called now. Haas. So, well, yeah, Ocon, he actually held off against Lewis for the first stint and defended against him reasonably well. Behrman knocked out in Q1, but then he was running up in 12th, and I thought he was going to do another thing where he just starts at the back and then just like falls upwards and works his way into the points, and then his engine went poof, and that was that done, and gave us a very inconveniently timed virtual safety car. Yeah, they were there. Points weren't on the cards, but whatever.
I mean, Behrman was in the points in the sprint, and then he got the penalty.
What did he get the penalty for again?
I think it was an unsafe release on someone on. I can't remember who it was now, but it was an unsafe release.
Oh, yeah, unsafe release, but doesn't say what. No, he was 9th, so he wasn't in the points for the sprint.
Because of other people's penalties, he eventually got promoted in.
And then he got then that took him out. But yeah, he seems to be good at that. Wasn't there someone else a few years ago? It was becoming a bit of a recurring theme of them just like storming through, qualifying badly and just storming through the field. But yeah, maybe Sainz or something. But yeah, sorry?
Hamilton last year.
Maybe Hamilton. But that's the thing, he always moves forwards, because even though this race sucked for him, he qualified 12th and then still finished 8th. Like, he always moves forwards no matter what. But yeah, he's doing a lot of that. The car is up and down, because there are going to be a lot of races like this where it's just in the midfield, and other times it's quite good, and yeah, they do their thing.
What a duel with Ocon and Hamilton, though. That was a great duel in the race, probably the best one I've seen this season. The wheel-to-wheel action between those two was excellent. But ultimately, Esteban got stuck behind some cars after his pit stop. It destroyed his tires. The Haas still doesn't have great tire management compared to the top teams. So, yeah, and then Pirelli just, again, they make tires that are just so unpredictable. And whether it was Ocon's tires just completely disintegrating behind the other cars, whether it was Hamilton and Leclerc having the exact same pace despite being on different tire strategies, you know, it's not good enough by Pirelli. But I think Haas, they have a good car in the sense that it's not the worst car, but this car still has some considerable weaknesses like tire management, and you know, their drivers just need to, you know, maintain consistency if they want to finish ahead of the others. But you know, tough race for them. Ollie was unlucky, but you know, there's room to grow. There's room to improve, and I think this team has a lot of potential. But it's just you can see it's not the Haas of, what I'm trying to say is it's not the Haas of Gunther Steiner, which was a comedy act, but it's still a Haas that needs to polish up some things. Drivers need to stop making mistakes, but more than that, the car needs to improve. Tire management has been a constant weakness of this team. And then just some of the decision making and pit stops that they took with their drivers just didn't work again. So it's not as bad as it was with Gunther, but they still need to improve. The good thing is there's light at the end of this tunnel, I think, with their current team principal.
One thing I did notice, though, is that this was one of their 3 home races, and they were one of the teams that didn't bother with special helmets or a special livery.
Yeah.
Like maybe they're beginning to be like, yeah, we're not really an American team, so let's not bother with the cringe, and everyone else can have bright pink cars and whatnot.
Yeah.
I was about to say, because for an American team, they haven't hired any American drivers ever. They've had Russian title sponsors. They've had Japanese partners with Toyota and stuff. I'm not dissing it. I don't think it's a bad thing to be.
It's not Haas F1 team. It's America's enemies F1 team.
Yeah.
basically.
It's just it's not exactly. I think they've realised that they're going to be kind of usurped by Cadillac when they come in, and they'll just be the kind of a second-rate F1. They could become what ProDrive was supposed to become to McLaren, and just just ditch Ferrari and just go to be a Cadillac B team.
I don't mind them just being, Haas, the comedy act, So
Yeah, we need the funny team to point
the funny team,
fingers at. Yeah, and they can be the joke team. Another team which is a bit of a joke at the moment is Alpine. So when it comes to Gasly, I have absolutely nothing to say to him. Like, you existed, at least you tried, good for you. But with Doohan, there is stuff to say, because the sprint was interesting because he went out in Q1 and then he went on that big tirade on the radio because I think he accused the team of releasing him from the garage at the wrong time, and he went into the wall or got blocked in by Gasly leaving at the same time, and then couldn't do his final lap or something, wasn't it?
Basically, what happened was Gasly. It was half of what you said. So Gasly tried to get out of the pit lane and couldn't, and got and not hit the wall, but got blocked himself in. And Doohan, obviously, he was on the left-hand side of him because it's a clockwise circuit. Sorry, not an anti-clockwise circuit.
The pit lane's on the right-hand side. Yeah.
So because Doohan was in the left garage, he got blocked by Gasly, who was in the middle of the pit lane.
Yeah.
And just I don't think either of them got out to do it. I think Gasly might have done, but Doohan didn't get out to do a fast lap. And I think Doohan has realised that Franco is fine. There is big rumours that he's going to find it, because I think there was one of Franco's sponsors went on and said something about him potentially getting a debut in Imola, and people didn't know if FP1 or if they meant an actual full-time seat. And I think the pressure is finally starting to mount. I know he's been underperforming all year, but I think he's finally starting to get under his skin now. And he's like, I know he's made mistakes. He made mistakes in Suzuka. He's made mistakes in the start in Australia, but I think he's really starting to realise this is like he's starting to point out every little thing that's going against him. And I mean, we talked about his incident with Lawson in the race, and we talked about his this thing in the sprint. But at the end of the day, even without these slights and these problems, he's not been performing well enough. I'm sorry, a guy who has been I don't know what the average gap is to Gasly in qualifying, but it's going to be more than half a second. He's doing as badly as Tsunoda is against Verstappen. I just don't see how this. Don't get me wrong, he's not a bad racing driver. He finished third in Formula 2 2 years running, but that's not the mark of someone who's going to set the world alight in Formula 1, and he hasn't set the world alight. He's not good enough. If he could go to IndyCar, have a nice enough career. He could go to Formula E if he wanted to, and win there. But he's just not Formula 1 level. I'm sorry. Like in the early 2010s, he might have been perfect for like a back marker team, like a Charles Pic or a Timo Glock, or Glock and Kovalainen were better than he ever was. But you get what I mean. He could have been like a good seat filler, like a lower midfielder back marker team. But now there's only 20 seats, and F1 is the best it's ever been in terms of overall field quality, in terms of drivers, and he's just not it. So bring in Franco Colapinto and let the Argentines take over every comment section that's ever existed on every social media platform ever.
Yeah, I mean, there was Doohan, he's more Zhou Guan Yu than Zhou Guan Yu was. Like, the driving is extremely average, but I think the pressure has got to him because we're told he had this 6 race time to get this done, and the 6 races are up before they make their assessment. But when originally he was going on that massive tire, and he had a very frustrated interview after sprint qualifying. I was looking at this. The thing is, every single tweet about it was in Spanish, like absolutely every single one. Nobody in the British media wanted to comment on this. Apparently, it's like, yeah, he's being watched like a hawk by Argentina, and that. But the thing is, this weekend, okay, so the qualifying in the sprint, that wasn't his fault. But then in actual qualifying, he does out-qualify Gasly by a very large margin as well. And then it just gets blown at the start. I mean, he wouldn't have finished in the points, but he would have finished 12th, 13th maybe. But yeah, and it just got blown at the start by Lawson. And it's like that keeps happening as well. And it's like I said with Brendan Hartley, he doesn't ever get a clean weekend. Something goes wrong, either his fault or something else that isn't his fault goes wrong. And yeah, maybe they will be, but it just looks like it's annoying because we haven't seen this in a long time. A driver's like, oh, you get 6 races and then we'll assess you and might get rid of you, even though when we signed you, Flavio wasn't here and you were going to be with us for the full season. It just doesn't look like an enjoyable experience being at that team and dealing with that, really, to be honest.
Especially as a rookie, it's got to be a huge mental toll. And yeah, in a way, it's tough for him, but that's F1, and if you can't handle it, you will be replaced. So, not the ideal rookie environment to be under such pressure so early, but he can't make mistakes, and he's only ever going to get an F1 drive if he starts performing from the next race, because he couldn't afford DNFs with Franco looming large. So, looks tough for Doohan, unfortunately. And then Gasly. Yeah, he pitted under the VSC, but my goodness, I don't think I even remember seeing him on TV. So, yeah, a lot of work to do for Alpine. That was an atrocious weekend.
Yeah, I was basically going to echo exactly what Karen said. People saying, "Oh, he doesn't deserve the way he's been, or the way he's been treated. It's not right and stuff." Does he deserve to be treated in any specific way? Like, I'm sorry, but Doohan, it's just like at the end of the day, it comes down to, like Karen said, performances, and he hasn't had any. Like yeah, as I said, yeah, he outqualified Gasly, but we don't know if there was some sort of, if it was by a large margin, like you say as well. We don't know if there was some sort of impeding, some sort of problem. Like the same way that Doohan's had in the past. But yeah, Alpine. Didn't Gasly say that he was ready to be 2026 champion? Yeah, good luck with that one, mate.
Probably, yeah. But Doohan, I think he's fighting back in the boardroom, so to speak, because he's been getting sponsorship deals and collabs that he's been doing himself. So he's obviously trying to financially secure his position as well.
I mean, I did see that a couple of weeks ago. I looked at the car for because it was on the onboards, and I saw that they had the ENI logo. I don't know what the company's pronounced. Any ENI. I was like, is it 2009 again? I was like, what? Why are they back on the Enstone team car?
I don't really know what Doohan's sponsors are, because he was with Red Bull for a bit, but I don't know what he carries with
Maybe
him.
Foster's?
Yeah. Well, they're allowed. The thing is, they're allowed to advertise Heineken because it's 0%. So that's how they get around the ban on alcohol.
I don't know if they actually sponsored him. I was being sarcastic because he's Australian.
But yeah, I don't know. He doesn't have anything he doesn't. Or yeah, Vegemite. Maybe they're going to do it.
They'd go for Piastri though, wouldn't they? Because you just would.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing, because there's two Aussies already. Because Piastri's got HP Tuners, his dad's company. That's the one always sponsored him. But I can't remember what Doohan's sponsors are, unless it's just his dad. Or something.
Face just on the side of a car like Ralph Bosch on an F2. That one.
Yeah. Just I'm sponsoring myself. Just yeah. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, but if he does disappear after these 6 races, at best he'll become someone's reserve driver, and then he'll just bugger off to Formula E or try IndyCar or Super Formula.
Mick Schumacher.
Yeah, something. Yeah, Mick was at the race, actually. He turned up in the paddock for this. What's he doing now? Is he still doing WEC with Alpine? Or
I guess so, yeah. Does anyone?
Probably.
I'm sure over 10 fans of WEC will tell us in the comments what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's next? Kick Sauber. Sort of positive weekend, because at this point I don't think they're the slowest team anymore for the Battle of the Greens. But they had because they both, Hülkenberg made Q2, or Bortoleto made Q2. Yeah, Bortoleto did. Hülkenberg almost did. But then in the race,
Hülkenberg got SQ3, or no, not SQ3, SQ2 as well, didn't he? And he got 10th in SQ1.
Yeah, he was 11th in SQ2 for sprint qualifying.
Okay.
So that was all right. But then in the race, Bortoleto, his engine goes, and they do that safety. They did the VSC when the car was obviously off the track, which was random. But he was in the back. But Hülkenberg didn't pit in the virtual safety car. And you've been on the hards for 34 laps. Why are you not pitting? And he would have only gained 2 positions for doing that. But it was just little things like, why didn't you do that? Such an obvious point to pit. And so he finishes 13th, which by their standards is reasonably good. Otherwise, fairly anonymous from them.
Yeah.
I have nothing to add to that, honestly. So, bizarre strategy error by a bizarre team.
Bizarre team. We've gone over days of Peter Sauber.
Okay, so then, the other green team, Aston Martin, that was...
it's a shame we don't have Ace here.
Yeah, that was interesting. They seem to have just become the slowest team now. Alonso, he got hit by Lawson in the sprint, but then he just spun on his own in the race. And I'm like, this is giving me Suzuka 99 vibes, mental fatigue and whatnot. Alonso at this point, I mean, this has just been tragic this season so far. And I wonder if he'll even... I think as a minimum, he'll retire at the end of the year, and he might even just quit halfway through, because it's this is I've had enough of this. It's just been pure pain for the past 15 years, and I don't need this anymore.
The only I was going to say the only caveat to that is he knows he's got an Adrian Newey car next year, and that's the only thing I can see him. He stays on, or he says, "Oh, I'm taking a sabbatical until the end of the year, and you can get Drugovic is because all the Stroll
and
the Drugovic
he's in the factory every day with Newey, like making sure the car is perfect for him, and doing all of that.
When other Stroll fans can see that Drugovic is just another Davide Valsecchi of the junior series and wasn't actually that good. Like, I don't get why Stroll haters think that Drugovic is the next coming of Jesus and that he was robbed of an F1 seat. But anyway, regardless of that, yeah, Stroll. I'm trying to think what he did in that. Right? I don't remember him doing anything, but again, neither did Alonso.
There were team orders apparently, wasn't it, or something? Didn't Alonso?
Yeah,
I think that they gave to get Alonso ahead, but they all got lapped.
Yeah,
and Lance, did he do anything in the sprint? He qualified 16th, and then he finished.
I think he was hovering around the top 10 when the pit stops were happening. But...
Yeah, okay, so he finished 5th in the sprint. I mean, that's the other thing is that at the moment, like Lance has all.
He finished 5th in the sprint. I didn't even.
But there were 10,000 penalties. That's why. Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing is that so far he's got all of their points have come from Stroll because Alonso hasn't. Oh, when would he have been? Well, I suppose. Okay, let's look at this. 2015 is probably worse start than this for a season for Alonso, but this might be his worst start to a season since Minardi. I don't know.
Point-wise, obviously, yes, it'll be since Minardi, but in terms of overall performances, it's definitely
6 races with no points. 2015 he didn't score points in the first 8 races.
Yeah.
They didn't start one of those races, which doesn't help. And then again, 2017, it took him. He missed 2 races again, and it took him 8 races to score. And then Minardi. Yeah. So pretty miserable. When you think 2 years ago he started the season with 6 podiums?
Yeah, I do think finally his age has started to catch up with him. Like, it's not necessarily he's bad or he's slower than he once was, but I think it's finally the mistakes are starting to creep in. He's starting to be a bit lethargic, and he's starting to like do the things you'd expect of a fallen, not a fallen champion per se, but a guy who used to be so good. And I think that this is what I've been saying. If Aston Martin is the championship winning car next year, it's going to be Stroll who wins it. And I said this at the start of said 2024 season review, or was it this year's season preview, and I got laughed at. And I'm being proven right because I'm a genius.
Yes, and I think it's also, just symbolic of how Lawrence Stroll runs his team, right? You don't necessarily have to be as smart as Nedzo to see that Lawrence favors his son in that he lives through his son. Lawrence is so passionate about racing. That's why I'd never drive for that team if I was a good F1 driver, because what are the chances Lawrence Stroll is ever going to back someone else over his son becoming a champion? 0, I'd say. So, another thing about this team in the race was that they just as Ferrari did, Aston split their strategies. Alonso and hard, Lance Stroll on the mediums, but nothing happened. It was exactly the same story like at Ferrari. No positions changed, and the teams were tested on almost the same thing. So.
Well, there's the thing we need to mention is the weather. Now that we covered the teams, it was supposed to rain and didn't because, well, it did rain obviously before the sprint and during it dried out, usual. And that was great. But then the Formula F1 Academy race got cancelled because of the rain was so heavy, and it was still very wet when they were driving those Lego cars around the track for the race as well. And then it just didn't. And then you could see it on the thing. It might skim the track. It's like it's not going to rain. Like it's just not. It's not going to do it. Which is unfortunate, but yeah, I guess by Miami standards, it was reasonably good as a race.
Yeah, I'd give it a 7 out of 10 rating. It was much better than the usual Miami race.
Yeah. So yeah, tops and bottoms, or tops and flops even. So top 3. Well, Piastri, Max, and well, maybe George. Actually, the rest of them were those ones.
Probably, I agree with that top 3. So
I'm going to go for Max number 1. I'm going to go for Antonelli number 2, and I'm going to go for George number 3.
Okay. And then the flops. We're supposed to do 1, but we normally do 3. Flops. Lewis, Lawson, yeah, and someone. Lando, I don't know.
Maybe Carlos. Well, no, Carlos had a good race. Yeah, Lando. Either Lando or, honestly, I thought Fernando Alonso had a terrible race.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You could put him on there. He spun by himself. It's rare to see him doing that. So maybe put Alonso there.
Right, I'll go for Lawson, yeah. Alonso, yeah, I think that's fair. And who was the other one that we just mentioned that I've just completely forgotten about? Fuck. I'll just go for Ferrari because they're just just institutionally incompetent.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, it was okay for Miami overall. Shame it didn't rain, but I'm going to be 48 and we're still going to be racing there. Like we don't need this for another 16 years. We just don't.
Yep.
Like, has any circuit ever got a contract extension that big? I can't think of any that's gone more than 10 years.
Oh, I bet that happened. Australia got that one till 2037 a couple of years ago, didn't it?
Possibly. Is it really 2037? That's quite. I mean, that's 12-year extension, I suppose. Like Silverstone gets Silverstone's got 5 or 6 years added.
I mean, in 2010, Donington got a 17-year contract.
Yeah, but then that got scrapped because so that was all corrupt and blah blah blah. But then Silverstone got 10 years off of that, I think, to get it then back on. But now it's also because it's like, oh well, we need the Middle Eastern races because they can afford it and we need the money, and it's like, well, 20 years ago we didn't need them and all the European tracks could afford it because they hadn't hiked the hosting fee up so much. Because that's the problem. Because even though they sell out crowds, that doesn't seem to count because it's like, actually no. The reason that like the Middle Eastern races, nobody can go and it doesn't matter because you've got the local Arabs and sheiks are just throwing in billions upon billions of pounds into it, and it doesn't make any difference. Whereas with like Hockenheim would sell out, and it's like, oh, it's still not enough. We have to close it down. So well, what else can they do beyond selling out? Like you've made as much money as you can, and it's still not enough.
Yeah,
because that needs to change. The hosting fees are ridiculous, and then maybe we can get some good circuits back.
But everyone's got to make their money. They've got to make their billions.
Yeah, but again, they were doing that for 50 years, and
I know I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, now we can't seem to manage anymore for any of them. Like even Zandvoort, like I get that we're only there because of Max, but it's because of Max that it's so successful. Again, it sells out. Huge crowds go there.
And again, it's a bit of a name apart from 2023 when they had a wet. Name one good thing that's happened at Zandvoort in the past 4 or 5 years.
Well, Max winning is good for the locals, I guess, but it's. I wonder if they know something they're dropped there because that circuit's getting dropped. They know that Max is retiring soon, so we'll just go with it.
It's a naff circuit and it's produced nothing of no.
Well, that's the thing that the Mexico City just got a 3-year extension, which means is that Checo has signed a 3-year deal with Cadillac. Is basically what that means. Or Pato O'Ward is coming to Formula One, replacing Norris at McLaren.
Yes.
One of the two. Yeah, one of that. Yeah, we'll see. Well, at least in 2 weeks' time, we have a proper circuit in Imola, so that should be, with or without rain, that's always entertaining, and then we can really get going with the European leg of the season. You've been listening to the DRS Train podcast. We're on YouTube and Spotify, and you can find us on Instagram and X at the DRS Train podcast. Make sure to tune in for our next episode. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.